I used to think our wedding photo captured the happiest day of my life. I was wrong. One tiny detail I'd never noticed before destroyed everything I believed about love. It was raining that night. I remember because the sound of the rain always made me nostalgic, and I was in one of those moods where memories feel softer than they should. I'd been cleaning out my closet, trying to make space in a house that had become too quiet, too large for one person. That's when I found the old album buried beneath a pile of forgotten things. Our wedding photos, printed on thick glossy paper, still smelling faintly of time and dust. I sat on the couch and opened it, page by page, as if I were stepping into a life that once belonged to someone else. There we were, frozen in light and laughter. Her in that white dress that I thought made her look like everything good in the world. Me, smiling like a fool who thought forever was a promise that couldn't break. I told myself I was over her, that the years had made me immune to the sting of remembering. But memory doesn't fade, it just hides in places you stop looking. So when I flipped to that last photo, the one we'd framed and hung in our living room, something inside me shifted. I stared at it longer than usual, tracing the curve of her smile, the way her hand rested on my chest. And then, like an echo through fog, my eyes caught something in the background. A shadow. A face. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just another guest. There were dozens of people there, laughing, drinking, dancing. But the longer I stared, the colder I felt. The man was standing just behind us, half hidden, but not by accident. He was watching us. Watching her. There was something intimate about his expression, something no stranger should have had. I leaned closer. My heart began to beat faster, a strange rhythm that didn't match the silence around me. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of the photo, and started to zoom in. The image blurred, then sharpened. The man's eyes were fixed on my wife. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. I didn't recognize him. Not from her side of the family, not from mine. Just someone who shouldn't have been there. I laughed under my breath, trying to shake off the unease. Maybe he was just a friend of a friend, someone random who got caught in the frame. But that tiny laugh didn't last long. The more I stared, the less random he felt. My chest tightened. The air in the room felt heavy, stale, as if the walls themselves remembered something I didn't. I took the photo out of the sleeve and held it under the lamp. My fingers trembled slightly, the way they do when something deep inside you starts whispering a truth you're not ready to hear. The stranger looked familiar in a way that made no sense, like a face you've seen in passing. A crowd, a reflection, a dream. I wanted to stop looking, to put it back in the box and forget I ever saw it, but curiosity is cruel. Once it bites, it doesn't let go. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a drink, and told myself I'd forget about it by morning. But I didn't. I couldn't. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, that face appeared, the stranger watching us, smiling just enough to make it feel like mockery. By dawn, I'd given up on rest. I turned on my computer, scanned the photo, and zoomed in again. The resolution was terrible, but there was something in his posture, his gaze, something human and knowing. My mind began replaying every detail of that day. Every moment she disappeared to fix her makeup. Every glance she exchanged with someone I couldn't see. I remembered a strange tension when we cut the cake. A look that flashed across her face for just a second before she smiled at me again. At the time, I thought it was nerves. Now, I wasn't so sure. I closed the file, sat back, and let the silence speak. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like wet earth and regret. I thought about calling her my ex-wife. But what would I say? Hey, I found a ghost in our wedding photo? I didn't even know if I wanted answers. Sometimes the truth feels like a loaded gun. You want to pick it up, but you know, once you pull the trigger, nothing will ever be quiet again. Still, something inside me had already changed. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't shake the feeling that this man wasn't just a stranger in a photograph, that he'd been there for a reason. And that reason had everything to do with her. I poured another drink and stared at the photo until the sun rose. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I was going to find out who he was. People say closure is about moving on, but sometimes closure means going back, all the way back, to the moment the lie began, and that's what I was about to do, whether I liked it or not. Because the thing about the past is, it doesn't stay buried. It waits, patiently, and when it's ready, it knocks on your door. Or, in my case, it smiles at you from the background of a photograph. And once you see it, you can never look away again. When I met her, I didn't believe in fate. I believed in timing, in the idea that life sometimes opens a door at the exact second you're desperate enough to walk through it. She was my door, my escape from loneliness. My proof that maybe, just maybe, love could save a person from himself. Her name was Emily. The first time I saw her, she was sitting by herself at a small coffee shop downtown, sketching something in a notebook. I remember the way her hair fell over her face, the way she bit her lip while concentrating, as if she were holding the world still with that single gesture. I'd gone there to write an article I didn't care about. She made me forget every word I was supposed to type. I don't remember what excuse I used to talk to her, but I remember her laugh. It wasn't loud. It was the kind that stays under your skin, soft, private, the sound of something warm breaking through the cold. Within weeks, we were inseparable. She was quick with jokes, stubborn in arguments, and had this quiet confidence that drew people in. Everyone loved her. My friends said she made me better. My mother said she looked like someone who'd never let go of what she loved. And, for a while, she didn't. Our first year together was everything I'd ever wanted. We traveled, stayed up late watching old movies, cooked dinners we'd ruin and laugh about. When I proposed to her, it wasn't grand or planned. It was at home, over takeout, with soy sauce packets still on the table. She said yes before I even finished asking. Looking back, I wonder if she said yes out of love or out of fear of losing control. Maybe both. I'll never know. The wedding came fast. Too fast. She wanted a small ceremony, something intimate. I didn't mind. I thought it was romantic. But now, years later, when I replay it all, I see the patterns I missed. The guest list she controlled entirely. The way she got nervous whenever I mentioned inviting my old friends. The photographer she insisted on hiring, someone she knew from college. At the time, I thought she was just being particular. I didn't see it for what it was. Careful construction. The morning of the wedding, she barely touched her breakfast. I assumed it was nerves, but her silence had an edge to it. I remember trying to catch her eyes, to tell her without words that everything would be fine. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're walking into something they've already decided will end badly. Still, the day was beautiful. The vows, the laughter, the toasts, all of it felt like a dream that had finally let me in. When she walked down the aisle, I swear the air changed. She looked ethereal, untouchable. I thought, this is it. This is forever. But forever, it turns out, has an expiration date. I remember one strange moment right after the ceremony. While everyone was clapping and music was playing, I saw her glance toward the crowd. Just a flicker of a second, but her expression changed. It was subtle, but it was there. Her shoulders tensed, her eyes softened, and then she looked away. I didn't think much of it. I should have. A few months after the wedding, I started to notice small things. She guarded her phone. She stepped outside to take calls. Once, I woke up at 2 in the morning and found her sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. She said she couldn't sleep. I believed her. Because that's what love does. It convinces you to trust even when the evidence says otherwise. Then came the excuses. Late nights at work, weekend meetings, a business trip that didn't make sense but that I didn't question. Every time she left, I felt a small crack forming inside me. And every time she came back, she'd cover it with affection, distraction, and guilt. It's strange how easily you can be manipulated by the person you love the most. They don't even have to lie directly, they just have to let you fill in the blanks with hope. Our arguments started small. Forgotten plans, missed calls, emotional distance. Then came the bigger fights, about nothing and everything at once. She'd accuse me of not trusting her, and I'd apologize just to make it stop. But I could feel her slipping away, piece by piece, like a photograph fading in sunlight. The divorce came 3 years later. No affair, no big reveal, just silence. She said she needed space, and I didn't ask for details. I signed the papers because I thought that was what love meant, letting someone go if they no longer saw you the same way. I told everyone we simply grew apart. But that was a lie. The truth was, she'd been gone long before she walked out the door. I just didn't want to admit it. After she left, I tried to move on. I threw myself into work, into distractions that didn't mean anything. I told myself the past was a closed book. But when I found that wedding album years later, it was like opening a wound I didn't realize was still bleeding. And now, with that stranger's face burned into my mind, all those quiet moments, the phone calls, the glances, the controlled guest list, suddenly made sense. It wasn't paranoia, it was evidence. I just hadn't learned how to see it yet. I closed the album and sat in the dark, thinking about every time she told me she loved me, every time I believed her, every promise that meant something only to me. And for the first time, I wondered if our entire story, from the coffee shop to the altar, had been a lie built on top of another lie. Maybe she'd never really loved me. Or maybe she did. Maybe she just loved him more. I couldn't stop thinking about that face. It followed me everywhere, showing up in the corners of my mind like a shadow that refused to fade. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his expression. Calm, deliberate, watching. It wasn't just curiosity in his gaze, it was ownership. He looked at her the way I used to. Days passed, but the unease grew heavier. I started going through everything I had from our time together. Photos, messages, even receipts. At first, it felt ridiculous, like I was chasing ghosts, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that the truth was right in front of me. I just hadn't learned how to look at it yet. I opened my old laptop, the one we used to share before she left. It hadn't been turned on in years. The battery was dead, and I had to dig through drawers for the charger. When the screen finally came to life, it felt like waking up a sleeping memory. The wallpaper was still our honeymoon photo. The one where she was leaning against me, sun in her hair, the ocean behind us. It used to make me smile. Now, it made me sick. Her old folders were still there. Work, taxes, photos. I hovered over photos for a long time, debating if I really wanted to do this. But the stranger's face kept calling me back, whispering through the silence. So I clicked. Thousands of pictures. Vacations, dinners, friends. At first, it was harmless nostalgia, until I started noticing a pattern. She was never alone. There were always little signs of someone else. A wine glass placed just out of frame. A shadow that didn't belong to me. A reflection in a mirror. Tall, broad-shouldered, blurred but familiar. My pulse quickened. I clicked deeper into subfolders. One of them was password protected. It was called Remember. I stared at the word for a long time, then tried the only password I could think of, our wedding date. It unlocked instantly. Inside were photos I had never seen before. The first one stopped my breath. It was her, smiling, leaning against a car I didn't recognize. The man beside her was half out of frame, but even from that, I knew it was him. The stranger. The same jawline, the same eyes that haunted my wedding photo. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Too comfortable. There were more. Him and her in cafes, walking on beaches, sitting in dimly lit rooms. Some were old, years before we met, but others were recent, too recent. A timestamp caught my attention, 1 month before our wedding. Another, 2 weeks after. My stomach turned. My hands shook as I scrolled, my mind trying to reject what my eyes were feeding it. I wasn't just looking at betrayal, I was looking at history. Their history. I was the interruption, not the story. One photo, buried near the bottom, broke something inside me. It was a picture of our wedding venue, taken from a distance. You could see the crowd, the white chairs, the altar. And in the corner of the frame, standing near the trees, was the stranger again, watching. The same smirk on his face, like he knew something no one else did. Like the entire ceremony had been a cruel joke. I shut the laptop and just sat there. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. I wanted to scream, to break something, to call her, but there was this part of me, the quiet part, that didn't want answers anymore. Because answers meant confirming that I'd been living inside her lie all along. Still, curiosity is cruel. It doesn't let go once it bites. I needed to know who he was. I started digging through her old social media, her friends, her coworkers, her college connections. I searched every photo, every tag, every forgotten comment. It took hours, but finally, I found him. His name was Daniel Hart. He was a photographer, based in the same city we lived in, the same photographer who'd shot our wedding. The realization hit like ice water down my spine. I felt my skin crawl as everything clicked into place. She hadn't just hired him, she'd brought him there. He wasn't a guest, he was part of the plan. He'd been watching us because he was never meant to be a stranger at all. I clicked on his profile. It was mostly professional. Landscapes, portraits, weddings. But buried between the posts, I found one that made my blood run cold. A photo of a woman sitting by a window, sunlight spilling across her face. My wife. My Emily. The caption read, Muse. It was dated 4 years before we met. I pushed my chair back and just stared at the screen. Everything inside me was shaking. My hands, my voice, my belief in everything I'd ever been told. She'd been lying since the very beginning. He wasn't just someone from her past, he was the past. The one she'd never left behind. Suddenly, every moment of our life together rewrote itself in my head. The day she told me she wanted a small wedding. The way she avoided talking about the photographer afterward. The strange tension whenever I mentioned how well the photos turned out. It all made sense now. She married me, but she never stopped belonging to him. The room felt too small. I stood up, pacing, trying to control the storm inside me. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation, it all blurred into something unrecognizable. I wasn't even angry at her anymore. I was angry at myself, for being blind, for believing that love meant never questioning, for ignoring every instinct that had tried to warn me. I went back to the laptop, stared at his face on the screen, and whispered his name aloud. Daniel. It tasted bitter. I wanted to know if he still saw her. If she still saw him. If their story was still being written somewhere without me. I didn't know what I would do with that information, but I needed it. I needed to look this ghost in the eye and understand why he was still haunting my life. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I sent her a message. It was simple. Just 5 words. I found the wedding photo. She saw it. No reply. Hours passed. Then, finally, 3 dots appeared. Typing, stopping, typing again. And then she sent just 1 sentence back. Please don't do this. That's when I knew I was right. There were still secrets she didn't want me to find. And I was about to find them all. Her message sat on my screen for hours. 5 words, small and harmless, but heavy enough to crush me from the inside out. Please don't do this. Not, what photo? Not, what are you talking about? Just that. A quiet plea from someone who already knew exactly what I had found. By the time midnight came, I still hadn't replied. I just kept staring at her message, watching the gray text bubble like it was breathing. I felt detached from myself, as if I were watching another man's life unravel, a stranger's tragedy. But the pain was too familiar to belong to anyone else. I poured myself a drink, whiskey, the kind that burns enough to remind you you're still alive, and opened the laptop again. The photo of her and Daniel was still there, the same smile, the same eyes. I clicked through every image like a surgeon cutting deeper, each click another incision into the corpse of my marriage, until finally, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A file inside the folder called Drafts. It wasn't photos, it was letters. Most were addressed to him. I opened the first one. It was dated a month before our wedding. D. I keep telling myself I can let you go, but I can't. He loves me, he really does. But when I look at him, all I see is the space where you used to be. I thought time would make me forget you, but it didn't. It just made me better at pretending. My breath caught. I scrolled down. I know what I'm doing is cruel. But I can't face another year alone. I need stability. I need something real, even if it's not the kind of love I feel for you. You'll understand one day. I sat there in silence, staring at her handwriting, slanted, careful, like she'd poured the truth onto the screen in whispers. The next few letters were worse. Confessions, half-written messages never sent. She wrote about guilt, about fear, about how she wished she'd never introduced us. One letter ended with, "I'm sorry for what I'm about to do." The date was 3 days before the wedding. It felt like the floor beneath me gave way. Everything I believed in, every moment we'd shared, was just a performance rehearsed for an audience of one. Him, Daniel. The man who stood in the background of my wedding photo, like the director of a film I didn't know I was starring in. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, reading her words over and over until they became noise. Then, as dawn crept through the window, I opened my browser and searched for him. Daniel Hart. Photographer. Still living in the same city, still posting his perfect shots, smiling at the camera like a man who'd never lost anything. He looked older, maybe a little tired around the eyes, but still smug, still untouchable. He had a studio now. Hart Light Photography. I memorized the address. I didn't tell anyone what I planned to do. Who could I tell? That I'd found a ghost in a picture and wanted to confront it in real life? It sounded insane, but there's a point after betrayal where reason doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is the ache for truth, even if that truth burns through what's left of you. The studio was tucked between 2 brick buildings downtown. Clean, modern, minimalist. I stood outside for nearly 10 minutes before I had the courage to step in. The door chimed softly, and the smell of chemicals and paper filled the air. Framed portraits lined the walls. Couples, families, smiles frozen forever. He came out from the back, wiping his hands on a cloth. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Seeing him in person made everything real. The face I'd stared at for days, the one that had haunted my marriage. Now it was inches away. "Can I help you?" he asked, polite, professional. His voice was steady, confident, the voice of a man who didn't know his ghost had come to life. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him. The way he moved, the calmness in his posture. I wondered if he recognized me, the husband, the fool in the photo. His eyes flickered for a moment, and I saw it. That faint spark of recognition. He knew. I pulled the photo from my jacket pocket and slid it onto the counter. "You took this," I said. He looked at it, then at me. "Yes, I did. Beautiful couple. Great lighting that day." Beautiful couple. The words felt like acid in my ears. "You were there," I said quietly. "At my wedding." He nodded. "I was the photographer." "You were more than that." His jaw tensed, almost imperceptibly. But I saw it, that tiny shift, that ghost of guilt that flickered across his face. "I think you should leave," he said. "Not yet." My voice cracked, somewhere between anger and exhaustion. "She knew you were there, didn't she? You weren't just working that day, you were watching her." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence told me everything. I leaned in closer. Why? Why come? Why stand there like a ghost in the background of my wedding? He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because she asked me to." The world seemed to tilt. My chest felt hollow. "She what?" "She asked me to be there," he said softly. "She said it would help her let go." Let go. The words hung in the air, fragile and cruel. "She said marrying you was the only way she could move on," he continued. "She wanted me to see it, to see her choose someone else. I thought it would help her. I thought it would help me too." I laughed, a broken, humorless sound that echoed through the empty studio. "So you both used me?" He shook his head. "No, she did love you, just not the way you loved her." I felt my throat tighten. The room blurred around me. All I could see was that photo. The three of us, each trapped in our own lie. I took the picture from the counter and folded it once, then again, until it disappeared into my hand. "You know what's funny?" I said, my voice low. "You're in that photo forever. Every time I look at it, you'll still be there. Watching, smiling. You won." He didn't respond. He didn't try to stop me when I turned and walked out. The cold air hit my face like punishment. As I stood on the sidewalk, the city moved around me. Cars, strangers, the sound of life going on. But inside me, something had stopped. The kind of stillness that comes after you finally hear the truth. It's not peace. It's just silence. That night, I opened the wedding album one last time. I stared at the photo. At her, at me, at him. I could almost hear her voice saying my name, soft and trembling, from somewhere far away. And for the first time, I understood. I hadn't lost her on the day she left me. I lost her on the day she said, "I do." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. My mind replayed everything, every word Daniel said, every detail of her letters, every lie that had once sounded like love. I felt hollow, but not broken. Maybe because there was nothing left inside me to break. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to write her. I wasn't going to scream or beg or ask her why. I wanted to see her. One last time. Not to fix anything, just to end it properly. The way it should have ended years ago, before the truth got buried under all the pretending. I found her easily. She hadn't moved far. Same city, different life. Her social media said she worked as a consultant now. Same smile in every photo, but it was different when you knew what it hid. Smiles are easy when you've already confessed your sins to yourself. I messaged her. "We need to talk." She agreed. No excuses, no hesitation. Just an address and a time. 6 in the evening, a quiet cafe on 5th Street. The same place we used to go on Sundays. When I walked in, she was already there. Same posture, same calmness, as if time hadn't touched her. For a moment, it almost felt like we were us again, before the lies, before the ghost in the photo. Then she looked up, and our eyes met, and the illusion broke. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. My voice sounded foreign to me, calm, detached, like a narrator describing someone else's story. She gestured for me to sit. I did. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of coffee machines filled the silence, too ordinary for what hung between us. Finally, I took the photo from my jacket pocket and laid it on the table between us. The edges were creased, the paper worn from being held too long. Her eyes fell on it. I saw the flicker of recognition, the tightening of her jaw. Her fingers trembled slightly as she brushed against the corner. "You found it," she whispered. I nodded. "You knew I would." She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. "I hoped you wouldn't," she said, "but I knew you might someday." "You invited him," I said. "Not a question, a statement. You asked him to be there." Her lips parted, but she didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, at the rain starting to fall, then back at me. "Yes." The word was soft, fragile, but it hit like a gunshot. "Why?" My voice broke before I could steady it. "Why bring him there? Why stand beside me and pretend?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just habit. She took a deep breath. Because I needed to let him go. I thought, if he saw me marry you, if he watched it happen, maybe it would make it real. Maybe it would finally end what we had. And did it? I asked. She shook her head. No. It made it worse. Silence. Heavy, suffocating. I felt the room closing in on us, two ghosts sitting among the living. You could have told me, I said quietly. You could have said something before it all turned into this. I wanted to, she said. But you loved me so much. I didn't want to ruin that. You didn't ruin it, I said. You just made it a lie. She flinched. Her hands tightened around her cup. I did love you, you know. Maybe, I said, but not enough to be honest. We sat there for a while, both knowing there was nothing left to save. I studied her face, familiar yet distant. The woman I'd once promised forever to now looked like a stranger wearing her skin. I went to see him, I said. Her eyes widened. He told me you wanted him there. He told me why. She looked down. Then you know everything. Not everything, I said. What I don't know is how you could stand there beside me, say your vows, and still think of him. She closed her eyes. Because part of me was still his. There it was. The truth. Raw, ugly, final. I exhaled slowly, feeling the last thread of hope snap inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. You know what's funny? I said after a long pause. I used to look at that photo and see happiness. Now I see the three of us. Me, you, and the man who never left. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I couldn't find any sympathy left to give. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be, I said. You did what you thought you had to. I just wish I hadn't spent years loving a version of you that never existed. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Not out of anger, just clarity. Goodbye, Emily. She nodded, her lips trembling. Goodbye. I stood up, leaving the photo on the table. As I turned to leave, she called my name softly. Do you hate me? I paused. For a moment, I thought about lying, about saying something kind, but honesty felt like the only mercy left between us. No, I said, I don't hate you, but I'll never forgive you. Outside, the rain had turned into a downpour. I walked without an umbrella, letting it soak through my clothes, wash the last pieces of her from my skin. For the first time in years, I didn't feel numb. I felt clean. That night, I sat in my living room with the old wedding album on the floor beside me. I flipped through it one final time, page after page, until I reached the photo, the one with him in the background. I tore it out carefully, folded it once, and placed it in an envelope. On the front, I wrote her name. No message, no explanation, just her name. The next morning, I mailed it to her. I never heard back. But sometimes, late at night, I imagine her opening it. I imagine her seeing the photo again, the same way I did, the same shock, the same silence. I imagine her realizing that for once, she was the one being watched. And maybe, in that moment, she finally understood what she'd taken from me. Because closure isn't about forgiveness. It's about returning what never belonged to you. And that photo, that memory, that lie, it never belonged to me. It was hers all along. Now, it's back where it belongs. It's strange how silence becomes a habit after betrayal. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it fills you. Weeks passed, and I started moving through life like a ghost walking through his own past. Work, sleep, repeat. The world went on, as it always does, indifferent to the collapse of small universes like mine. I got rid of most of our things. Her clothes, the wedding gifts, the photos that once lined the hallway. But not that one, the photo with him in the background, the one that had torn my world open. I kept it. Not out of love, not even out of pain, but because it felt honest. It was the only photo that told the truth. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at it. The way she looked at me, the curve of her smile, the faint glimmer of something hidden in her eyes. I used to think it was joy. Now I knew it was guilt. The stranger behind us, Daniel, frozen forever, watching, knowing what I didn't. It wasn't a wedding photo anymore. It was evidence of love, of lies, of the things people bury beneath the word forever. One evening, I invited my friend Mark over, the first person I'd let into my house since it all came apart. He noticed the photo immediately. Why'd you keep that one? He asked, nodding toward the frame on the shelf. I looked at it, then back at him. Because it's real, I said. Everything else was a story. He frowned, not understanding, and I didn't explain. How could I? How do you explain that your whole life once depended on a lie so fragile that one photograph could destroy it? Some truths aren't meant to be shared. They just live inside you, reshaping the person you thought you were. Over time, I started to feel something close to peace. Not forgiveness. I don't believe in that word anymore. But acceptance. The kind of acceptance that comes when you stop demanding explanations from ghosts. Emily and I never spoke again. I didn't block her. I didn't reach out. We simply disappeared from each other's timelines, like two parallel lives that once crossed and left a scar where they met. A few months later, I saw an article online about Daniel. Local photographer wins an award. There was a picture of him holding a plaque, smiling that same calm smile. In the corner of the frame stood a woman, not Emily, someone new. I stared at the photo for a long time. He'd moved on. Maybe she had too. Maybe I was the only one still haunted. But even ghosts learn how to live eventually. One night, I poured myself a drink and sat in front of the window. The rain had started again, soft at first, then steady. The sound brought me back to that first night, the night I found the album. It felt like a lifetime ago, and maybe it was. The man I was back then believed that love could fix everything. The man I am now knows that love can be the sharpest blade in the drawer. I thought about Emily. Not the liar, not the cheater, just the woman. The one who used to draw in coffee shops, who laughed softly when she didn't want anyone to notice. I realized that somewhere in all the ruin, I'd still loved her. Maybe not who she was, but who I believed she could be. And maybe that was my real mistake. I finished my drink and stood up, looking at the photo one last time. The light from the window reflected across the glass, hiding parts of it. Her face, his figure in the background. For a moment, I saw only myself standing there between them. The man in the middle of a story that was never his to tell. I took the frame off the shelf and opened the back. The photo slid free. It felt lighter than I remembered, like it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. I carried it to the fireplace and watched the flames flicker to life. The paper caught quickly, curling inward, the colors twisting into smoke. When it was done, I stood there in the dim glow and whispered, "Goodbye." Not to her, not to him. To the version of me who believed that truth was something people gave you. It's not. Truth is something you dig out of the wreckage after the fire. After that night, I stopped dreaming about them. The house felt different. Still quiet, but no longer empty. I started going out again, meeting people, talking, laughing even. It was strange at first to hear my own laughter and not recognize it. But that's how healing starts, quietly, without permission. Months turned into a year. One evening, I found myself walking past the cafe where Emily and I first met. It was still there, still crowded, still humming with the sound of lives that hadn't broken yet. I stopped at the window, watching strangers talk, flirt, and fall into the same traps I once did. There was a kind of beauty in it, the way people keep believing, even after everything. I walked away smiling. Not bitterly, not sadly, just human. And now, sometimes, when the rain falls and the past knocks softly at my door, I let it in. I pour a drink, sit by the window, and think about how something so small, a face in the background of a photograph, could change everything. How love can rot beneath the surface while still looking perfect on the outside, and how the truth, no matter how much it hurts, will always find its way into the light. Because, in the end, love and betrayal share the same heartbeat. One just beats a little faster before it dies. And that photo, that cursed, beautiful photo, taught me the only lesson worth remembering. Love doesn't fade. It just hides, waiting for you to zoom in.